Welcome back to my channel. My name is Miata Ade Labale. I'm doing some reviews of Shadow and Bone. We love the books, we love the series. If you guys already missed, I've already done a full overview of the series in another review, so please check that out. But if you are here, that means you want to talk about episode 1, and I want to talk about episode 1. So let's get into it. Before I really jump in, at this point it's actually very funny. I have a few people who are watching the show kind of with me, and they are confused. They are confused. They are so confused about what's going on, and I think this is in part to the fact that, like, Ravka, all its neighboring territories, and in general the Grisha and their powers are never really explained kind of all at once. They kind of go in bits and pieces and hope you just add it up. This happens in the book as well. So before I jump into episode 1, I want to explain those things. For y'all, just a real quick, I'm going to put a map on the screen. Dear God, please let me know how to edit this. And I'm going to show y'all what Ravka looks like so y'all don't get confused. Okay, so if you guys are looking at the map right now of Ravka, basically you see that big place? Ravka. That's where all of the stuff, you know, taking place with the little palace, big palace, where most of the Ravkins live. They live in what we are seeing is East Ravka. You see that thing right in that middle? The unsea? That's the fold. So the big black stuff that we see in the show, that is the fold. On the other side of the fold, to the west, is West Ravka. That is where they're trying to get across to take supplies in that first or second episode. Ketterdam is also to the west. Whenever we see Kaz or Inesh and Jesper, all of them, they are also to the west of Ravka. Now, if you look at Ravka, that's sandwiched in between Firda and the Shuhan. These are the enemies of the Ravkins. They have been at a civil war basically for a long ass time between the Shuhan and the Firda. So that is the issue that they're having. They can't go around the fold to get to West Ravka because their enemies are there. They're basically getting starved out because they're surrounded by their enemies and they're running out of money. That is why there is a civil war going on. Okay, we just went over Ravka. Hopefully y'all get that shit now. They really need a kind of Game of Thrones like map to just go around and explain it to people. Now let's go over very quickly the Grisha, because I feel like nobody understands what the Grisha do and how their powers work, and that's also confusing. We're just gonna go through the classifications of the Grisha super quick. You'll notice that there are Grisha who are wearing red keftas. Keftas are those coats. The red keftas are the Corporealki. The Corporealki are basically the order of the living and the dead. They handle bodies. So we have our healers and we have our heart renders. Our heart renders are the ones that you see when they're in battle and people are like, or they do stuff to your heartbeat. Those are heart renders. We also have healers. They do what healing does. Then we also have characters like Jinya, who is a tailor. They can fix up your face, fix up your body, do stuff to the outside of you, basically. Then we have the Etherealki. This is the order of the summoners. So when you see Zoya, she says she's a squaller. They do stuff with the wind. The Inferni work with fire, obviously. We have the Tide Makers who work with water. They wear blue keftas. Last but not least, but kind of least, we have the Materialkis, which is the order of the Fabricators. Basically, Fabricators are the people who work with matter and turn it into other things. David, who you guys see in the show, is wearing a purple kefta. They wear purple keftas, and he is a fabricator. And there are two different types of fabricator. There are the Duras, and the Duras kind of work with matter and turn it into other things. David is one of those. And then we have the Alchemy. The Alchemists work with poisons and they work with explosions, basically. Okay, I could go more into it, but that's all y'all need to know for real. The colors of their keftas and what they do. So I hope that clears some stuff up if y'all were confused. Now we can talk about the first episode. Shit moves so fast. Like, we start right the fuck off in this episode. Like, they don't waste any time. We start off watching Alina talk about having kind of like when she's growing up and learning about the fold a little bit. And then we immediately see Alina in the carriage with the other group of cartographers and some of the other men in the troops being taken to the war camp. One of the things that I have talked about so many times, and I'm going to keep bringing it up, Leigh Bardugo, again, was an executive producer on the show. For those of you guys that do not know, Leigh Bardugo was the writer of the Shadow and Bone books and the Six of Crow books. And in the books, Alina is white, and Leigh Bardugo and the showrunner, whose name is Eric, I don't have his last name, so his name is Eric. Leigh and Eric both decided to make Alina be half Shu. Half Shu being half Southeast Asian, basically, for her heritage. And I loved this choice. So just right away getting to see Alina's face and getting to see right away that Alina has been dealing with discrimination. Even within, like, the troops there, they're all heading to war and they still are discriminating against her. I think it's so important to show why Alina would have been so ostracized the whole time and why she doesn't have many friends. The show does such a good job about that. So right away we see that Alina is getting taunted by other soldiers kind of in her unit for being half Shu. We quickly go to a flashback of her at the orphanage with the woman who runs the orphanage. She's learning a little bit about the Shadowfold. She asks the woman who kind of runs the orphanage, like, why can't we go around the Shadowfold? And the lady has a map. There's a map in front of them. And the lady's like, girl, look to the north, look to the south. We can't go around it. Your parents were eaten up by the fold, trying to cross it, trying to get away from the things that they had been through. People are constantly dying, trying to cross the fold. And what I did love to see, they don't really mentioned this in the books, but I did love that they basically mentioned that that orphanage is a pipeline to the army. Basically, there's no other job for people in this country. Everyone basically ends up getting drafted into war. So Alina has been training to be a cartographer her entire life, so basically she wouldn't become an infantryman, right? And Mal is a tracker. Yeah, I loved watching. They were like, yeah, you're at an orphanage and one day you're probably gonna die in the war. Great, great. We are now back in the present and their transport has arrived at the war camp and all of them get out and they see the fold for the first time in their lives and their minds are just like, fuck. Like, we gonna die if we have to cross that shit. There are a lot of flashbacks in the first couple of episodes that we really start to establish the relationship between Alina and Mal. So we immediately are going back to another flashback of Mal and Alina at the orphanage. We actually see how gentle Mal was as a child. He finds this bunny and he's trying to protect this bunny and he's showing it to Alina. When these like bullies come in, they call him a half-breed. That's when we also learn that Mal is also biracial, just like Alina, which again is probably one of the reasons why they're so linked, is they're so ostracized at the orphanage. And they're basically calling him names, and Alina, girl, she pulls out a little old letter opener, starts swinging and swanging, and you get to see right away, first off, that they've always been there for each other. But what I love about this is we see that when he was a child, Mal was quite gentle. Like, he runs away with this rabbit trying to protect it from becoming dinner at the orphanage. And then as soon as we finish that scene, boom, we see Mal in a kind of ring fight with another guy. Mal takes off his shirt, but you know, he's a good fighter, takes the other guy out. And then after he's trying to celebrate his victory, a Grisha comes in and is like, oh, you want to take me on? And I actually really like that what the show does is show that even though we spend a lot of time with the Grisha, it's wonderful to see why everyone who doesn't have powers disdains them and why they hate them. The Grisha are actually bullies. Mal even mentions at some point, either in episode 1 or 2, that when the generals aren't around, the second army, which is the Grisha army, is consistently bullying the first army, which is made up of people who aren't Grisha. So yeah, that Grisha man comes in and is like, oh, you want to take me on? Well, you want to take me on? Obviously, Mal cannot fight a man who can fight with like fire. And so I loved seeing that. I loved seeing that like the Grisha aren't as like amazing as we think they are in the books because we spend so much time with them in the books. Then we get to see Mal and Alina finally link up together. She sees him as she's coming in, and y'all, there is already so much more chemistry between Mal and Alina in this show than the books had, like books 1 through 3 ever had. Like right away, I was like, oh, they should fuck. I was like, what they doing? Can they go find like some woods and get some stuff done before they go to war? Like, what's happening? I talked about this in my review of the series as a whole. I am so happy with Archie Renault as Mal. His charisma and him bringing Mal to life completely livens up the relationship between him and Alina. So when they see each other, I'm like, yes, relationship. Yes, I get it. You guys have been best friends for forever. I completely understand. I see that there is an attraction between the two of you, that you two are both fighting. I loved it. This is what we needed in the books. So that did not quite happen in the books. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm so happy Leigh Bardugo, again, the writer, was a part of this, because I think she knew where she messed up in the books and she improved on it. And it made it so much more exciting to watch. I was excited to watch them. So sorry, go off on tangents, but I was like, as soon as I saw Mal and Alina look at each other, I went, oh, ow. And that is not something that ever happened to me at any point when Mal and Alina interacted in the books. So yeah, So as Mal and Alina are kind of walking around the camp, you know, he's got like his, you know, his arm over her shoulder, like, hey, baby, hey. Just friends, but hey, baby, hey. They also notice that their camp has been moved. And why has their camp been moved? Because the Grisha wanted more room to like practice. So like real people don't even matter. If you are not a Grisha, basically they can just move you away, do whatever they want to. The Grisha actually get real food. They have amazing tents. And we see just like the disparity between the first army's treatment and the second army's treatment. As they're walking around, we see a new skiff that has been built by the fabricators that hopefully will be able to cross the fold this time. The last skiff didn't make it to the other side. And then Mikaih and Dubrov, who are two of Mal's friends, come up and they meet Alina and they're like, yo, you the girl that Mal's been talking about? And Mal's like, yo, be cool. And I just love this moment because Mal cares about Alina so much. I love that he's been talking about his best friend to his friends. And I love that Alina's like, what you been saying? Stop. We then cut to the first army all gathered in a large tent. One of the things that's really prevalent is you see in the background of this tent basically propaganda against the SHU. So you see a big poster that basically has like an Asian man and then some like Ravkan writing, which is clearly like, we hate the SHU basically. And then they kind of cut to Alina's face. Do you know how hard it would be to be in an army where they're basically like people that look like this are the enemy and Alina's just there like, I'm here, great, cool, you hate me, cool. So we learned from the man that is talking, one of the commanders, that basically they need a supply run. They need to both get supplies from the other side, from West Ravka, and they also need to take supplies over to West Ravka. He is about to tell them who is going on this trip to the other side. Mal and Alina are kind of joking around. They both just got there, they're both new. Mal doesn't think he's gonna get chosen, and what happens? Of course, as they're listening to the man say the names, Mal's name is mentioned, and both he and Alina are so devastated because like, if you go across, you're not coming back. To be honest, it is hard to cross the fold and come back. A lot of people die crossing the fold. Probably more people die crossing the fold than make it back. So obviously they're so devastated. Alina's like, please, this gotta be a mistake. Even Mal says this has to be a mistake. And he's gonna go check with his superiors to make sure they actually need him on the trip. He is trying to keep his hopes up. He's like, listen, you know, if I make it to the other side, I'm gonna go to Ketterdam. And what happens next? Boom, bitches, we go to Ketterdam where we're gonna see our crows. Obviously, Ketterdam, if you guys look at it, it's supposed to be modeled off of kind of that like grungy, kind of gross Victorian England, kind of like an Amsterdam kind of place is where people go to brothels and have a crazy time. I love it. I do think the sets look very cheap in Ketterdam. You can tell that they are like in a building and had to build out sets. It does not look like a place. It looks like a set, but I do love being in Ketterdam. So of course, oh y'all, we start out with our baby Jesper. He's sitting at a table, you know, and there's a man that's trying to gamble with some counterfeit money, and Jesper's like, no, I think this is fake money. Jesper flips it in the air, shoots it with his gun, the coin falls down, they send the man out. Just a great opener for Jesper. However, Jesper shouldn't have been at the table. Y'all need to know Jesper is a gambling addict. He has an addiction problem. So then we get our introduction to Kaz. Kaz Brecker walks up there, got his little cane, and he's like, Jesper, what you doing? Jesper, what you doing? Get out. Go back to the door. Jesper's literally supposed to be guarding the door, y'all. He's just not doing his job at all. Then what is a really fun kind of scenario, in the books there is a painting that is stolen, a decapel painting. It happens off the pages and before the events of Six of Crows. And so it is kind of fun that there's a callback to this, that there is a man that comes into the club and is talking to Kaz about like, hey, we heard this painting was stolen. Do you want to sell it? Do you want to fence it? And Kaz, you know, being like, nah, don't know nothing about it. And that is just like in the books, same thing. Kaz and them stole this painting that should have been impossible to steal, and Kaz has it in his office. Not on the walls though, like, bitch, what the hell? Somebody gonna walk in and see that shit. Roll that shit up, put it under your mattress. And now that Kaz is completely alone, he's gonna take off his gloves and wash his hands. Please pay attention to Kaz's gloves and Kaz's hands. Kaz's inability to function without his gloves is a big part of his character, a big part of his character development. It's a big part of what happened to him in his youth. It's a big part of his PTSD. So like, this should probably continue to grow over the course of the next few seasons of the show, especially as we start to get into the storyline of the crows that actually happens in the Six of Crows books. So yeah, he's there, he's washing his hands, and then we hear like the window opens, you know? Like all of a sudden we can hear the pitter patter of the rain, and Kaz is washing his hands, and there's like a woman appears behind him, and who is it? And Ash. And Ash, my baby and Ash. I love her so much. And like the little spider she is, you know, she snuck in completely unseen. Now, Inesh comes in because she just found out some information on a new job. For 1,000,000 Kruga, Dreesen is looking for a crew. Now, she doesn't know what the job is yet, but she knows that, like, it's enough money to basically set all of them free. Kaz is pretty skeptical of the job, but Inesh tells him that Dreesen is taking meetings that night at midnight. She also learned that Dreesen brought in a prisoner. They brought in a man that's been kidnapped, and she couldn't figure out who it was without having to go through the private security that Dreesen hired. We also hear a little bit about Pekka Rollins, who's one of the major gang bosses in town. Inesh tells him that she found out this information from one of the other girls at the menagerie, which is a brothel where she has indentured servitude in. We'll talk more about that later. And she asked Kaz if he would consider helping that girl the same way he's helping Inesh. He said that the girl is similar to her, and Kaz shuts that shit down. He says, Inesh, there's no one like you. Oh, Kaz and Inesh, like, guys, I'm sorry, I'm gonna take a break from this. But guys, we're like in book 2 of their storyline, and we are still waiting for them to like really get together. The longing between the two of them is so maddening, and they just want each other forever and don't get together. Like, Back at the camp, Alina's just trying to get her dinner when a racist ass motherfucker line cook won't give her any food when she's in line, even though she's clearly part of the army, but because she is part Shu and she looks like the enemy, nah. He sends her to the back of the line, and Alina just decides not to get dinner at all. And Mal sees this whole thing. So Mal, wanting to help his bestie out, decides to go, and he sees like a bowl of fruit in a Grisha tent, and he goes to steal the fruit, and guess whose tent it belongs to? Zoya! I love Zoya. I know she's a little bitch, but like, I do. I love a bitch. So like, I love Zoya. And she is looking at Mal like he is a full meal. She's like, I get breakfast, lunch, and dinner, baby. What you got? What you got? And she's like, hey, baby, you know what I like to have happen before I, you know, kind of go off on trips? Get my back blown out. You want to get your back blown out? And Mal turns her down. By the way, in the books, he does not turn her down. This scene doesn't happen in the books, but in the books, Mal fucks Zoya. He definitely fucks Zoya at some point. And I think Zoya really, probably, I think she liked it. So he gets her fruit and he takes it to Alina. And he tells her a little bit about Zoya wanting her back blown out. But he tells Alina that Grisha women scare him, so he wasn't really interested. Just so interesting considering what's about to happen to Alina. Mal does tell Alina that unfortunately, yes, his lieutenant was right. He is going to be going across the fold on the next day. And Alina is obviously heartbroken and completely scared for him. She doesn't want him to go. Mal has lost so much to the fold. Mal lost his parents to the fold. She does not want him having to go across. He tells Alina that he will always find a way back to her, and then they get a little close, and they almost kiss, but no, they don't. We're best friends. We can't kiss. Kiss your best friends, guys. With consent. And Mal tells her he's going to write her a letter when he gets to the other side. Back in Ketterdam, pretty quick scenes here. The kids are trying to figure out how to go across the fold, and everyone they talk to is like, y'all, it is a death trap. You cannot get across the fold. Everyone's like, listen, if we could have done this, we would have done this years ago. Jesper wonders, it's not a dumb question, why they can't just dig under the fold, and Kaz lets him know, no, we tried that about 100 years ago. People tried that shit, and something hurt them digging the tunnels. It didn't end well. They start talking a little bit more about the fold, the fact that it was created by someone called the Black Heretic, the fact that they need a sun summoner basically to come along and destroy the fold, but there's never been a sun summoner in the history of history. At this point, Inesh and Jesper are like, we can just let this go. But of course, Kaz has got his teeth in it. He sees that 1,000,000 Kruga, he wants it. He cannot let it go. One of Kaz's men comes in and basically lets them know that Dreesen is looking for a heart render for whatever reason. And they're like, yo, dope, let's go get a heart render. But guess who's also looking for a heart render? Pekka fucking Rollins. Fucking Pekka Rollins. The fucking worst. He's just the worst of the gang bosses. And we immediately have a scene that is trying to establish for us, like, he's a bad man. Look how mean he is. There was no reason for Pekka Rollins to walk into that man's club, take that man's club, take his brothel, and then also kill him. Like, Pekka! Like, I get it. Y'all want to show that he's bad, but he's also a businessman. So, like, he's not just like a mob boss. Like, he actually is also, like, a pretty smart businessman. So I was just like, damn, that's kind of a lot. But I get it. They wanted to establish that Pekka is like the worst. So we get it. He's bad. Cool. Back at the war camp, the Black General has finally arrived. The whole First Army kind of starts coming out of their tents so they can see like, oh, his carriage is here, his carriage is here. And while they're all looking, one of Mal's superiors comes along and is like, hey, y'all, you've got 20 minutes until you need to be on the skiff. And he and Alina are clearly so scared. And he's like, don't worry, I'll always be here for you, Alina, before he takes off. And it's like the cutest little thing. Alexei, who's another one of the cartographers, comes out and is like, I'll be here for you, Alina. And it's just so cute. He clearly has a crush on her. And Alina, just all she can see is Mal. And I was like, Alexi, God, let's all pray for Alexi. I'm not Catholic, so I don't know what I just did, but like, poor Alexi. Now, Alina then has a flashback to when she was kids, and she remembers having a promise with Mal that they would always be together. And she realizes what she needs to do. No, she has to cross the fold with Mal. So runs to the cartographer's tent, and she pulls out every single map that has illustrations of the west coast of Ravka. So basically West Ravka, the other side of the fold. She's looking for all of those maps, and she destroys all of them. And when the superiors come in looking for maps, guess what? No maps left. So a cartographer is definitely gonna have to go on the skiff, and Alina volunteers as tribute. You know what Alina didn't see happening? The fact that all the cartographers had to go across. She literally gets, Alina! I know that there was no choices around this, but I was just like, it was so short-sighted on her part, and it is her fault that all of her friends die. So this is the very first time that I noticed, if you've read the books, Alina in the books is very, very weak. She's super weak. She's always just like, and everyone's like, eat. And she's like, I'm not hungry. But like, she can't run. She's always out of breath. She can barely like pick up like, I don't know, anything. And it was the first time I noticed that like, Jessie May Lee is not playing her weak at all. Like, I think Jessie May Lee is just too healthy and strong. So not at any point did I feel like this girl is weak. This was the point where I realized Alina was not the same Alina that we got in the books, which is a good thing. I got tired of how weak Alina was, to be perfectly honest, in the books. Yes, all of the cartographers show up on the boat. Mal's like, no, you gotta get off, But it's too late. They start pulling away from the dock, and now they're on their way into the Shadowfold. So now we are entering the Shadowfold. The Squallers, who are, again, the Grisha who do wind, are the ones who are pushing, the kind of pulling the wind, pushing the wind, doing some shit to actually get that skiff to go across dirt. The Shadowfold is not a sea. It is called the Unsea. It is literally sand and or dirt that they are crossing to get to the other side, to West Ravka. One of the things that made me so happy is right away, as we're getting into the Shadowfold, guess who's in charge? A black woman. It is this beautiful, dark-skinned Inferni, and I was so happy to see her. She was so in charge. She was running the ship. Now, did Homegirl die real quick? She did. She did, R.I.P. But did I say R.I.P. my beautiful black queen? I did in my notes. I was just so happy to see her. I was just like, yes, queen. She basically lets them know that the only lights on the ship that can be turned on are the blue lights they have on. She mentions this, so we know that this is a plot point that is gonna come back up. They cannot light anything because what's out there in the darkness will find them and eat them. It is completely pitch black right as the skiff is going through the fold. You can hear the Volcra screaming, and we can see the remains of the former ships that never made it through. Everyone is terrified, obviously. And kind of through the sail of the skiff, we can see a Volcra kind of like flying through. And that's when Alina and them really start getting scared. All the cartographers kind of duck down to their knees. Everyone pulls out their rifles and is ready for something to attack. I just need to know, like, if y'all were on a ship, would you not be below deck? I could not understand, like, if at the very second that I saw a Volcra, I'd be like, I'm gonna go check the storage. Is there storage? I'm gonna go check the storage. I would just be like, I cannot believe anyone spends their time on the top deck of that ship. No. So one of the blue lights goes out. I think maybe all of the blue lights go out, and that gorgeous black Inferni goes to check them. And you know what one stupid motherfucker does? And it's one of the cartographers. And my husband brought up the good fact that he's like, oh, the cartographers were not like really trained to go on a ship like this. So the fact that that general or whoever sent them all on the ship, it's almost partly his fault for sending untrained people on the skiff. So one of the cartographers lights the lantern and boom. I don't even know how he didn't notice, but a whole Volcra was behind the man. A whole Volcra was like, peekaboo, picks the man up, takes him away, and what does the man do? I'm sorry, I know you dying, but can you please not drop your lantern onto the skiff? The man drops his lantern onto the skiff, the whole thing goes up in flames. Perfect! Now the Volcra can see their buffet. Now everybody's under attack. They all get picked off one by one. We have to say goodbye to our beautiful black queen. Bye, queen, you got eaten. We loved you. So Mal is picked up in the air, and he's trying to stab at the Volcra, but he can't get away from it. And Alina picks up a gun and is aiming. Now Alina is a terrible shot, but she is able to shoot the Volcra. Mal falls onto the deck, and she gets over to Mal, but he has been scraped up so badly by the Volcra, and it looks like he's going to die, and he tells her that he's going to meet her in their meadow, and you know, they're looking into each other's eyes, and then Alina gets picked up by a Volcra. And as she's picked up by the Volcra, oh, her powers ignite. Please, I might be aging myself a little bit here. I'm not too old, but I'm old enough to have seen the movie Cocoon. Y'all remember the aliens in Cocoon? That movie came out in the 80s. Why Alina looked just like the aliens from Cocoon? I know we have better technology to show light. I just know it. I know it in my heart of hearts. Why are you looking like the movie Cocoon? We see this huge explosion of light, and then we cut over to West Ravka. Now, General Zlatan is like, he basically runs West Ravka. All of them are waiting at the docks for the skiff to come in, and they notice that it's just been too long, that there's no way that anyone survived. When what happens? Alexei runs out and just falls down. And they're like, hey, yo, where's the skiff? Back in Ketterdam, Pekka Rollins is like, yo, I own your club now, talking about that club where he killed the owner. He's like, I own your club now. We need to go on a mission. But, oh shit, wait, boss. The Heartrender's no longer at the Orchid Club. You know why? The Crows got her first, bitch. And they get to Dreesen before Pekka Rollins does. Now, Dreesen does not want to do any business with Kaz. He thinks Kaz and them are low. He thinks that they are dirty. They are also children. I kind of get his, like, refusal. But they got to him with the Heartrender first. He does try to say, yo, I'm not going to work with you. And Kaz is like, oh, really? So I'll report you to the guild for kidnapping. And the man's like, okay, I see you. This was also a point, though, for me that I noticed I was much more invested in what was happening in East Ravka with Mal and Alina than I was invested in what was happening with the Crows. This improved a little bit, especially as the two storylines started to come together. But I remember thinking, I kind of wish I was back on the other shore, because so much interesting stuff, like Alina had just had light come out of her, and it kind of like, I get that they were making us wait for it, but I didn't want to wait for it, and I almost was like a little annoyed that I had to spend any time in Ketterdam when I wished I was in East Ravka. So Dreesen's like, fine, y'all can come with me, and he takes them downstairs to see who the kidnapper is, and we find out that the kidnapped person is Alexei. So yes, the story for the Six of Crows basically is happening about 2 weeks later after the events of what was happening in East Ravka. Alexei witnessed what happened, but he's been basically too shell-shocked to tell anyone, and that's why Dreesen needed the Heartrender. What Dreesen basically knows is that 2 weeks ago, a skiff was coming across, and they all got attacked, and then some sort of, he thinks a device kind of exploded with light and obliterated all of the Volcra. And Dreesen wants the device, but only Alexei really knows what happened. The Heartrender, whose name is Melina, then goes up to him and slows down his heartbeat, kind of makes him feel calm, and is like, tell us what you saw. One of the things that we saw when the ship was being attacked by the Volcra is Alexei actually leaving the ship and running away. And so as he was running, he tripped, fell down, turned back and looked at the ship, and he saw, as Alina was being picked up by the Volcra, that she became basically a ball of light and obliterated all of the Volcra. And one of the coolest things about this scene is you see Inesh immediately like perk up and get incredibly happy. Inesh is deeply religious. All of Inesh's knives are named after saints. She's incredibly religious. Please keep this in mind. That's why she doesn't like to kill or want to kill. She's very religious. So her hearing about Alina, the Sun Summoner, this is a saint. To her, this is going to become a saint. So like, can you imagine, like for her, like one of her saints has just come to life. Dreesen obviously wants to know who it is, and Alexei asks him, hey, if I tell you, will you set me free? And Dreesen says yes. By the way, if a bad guy says he's gonna set you free, motherfucker's gonna kill you, okay? There's a lot of different explanations. There's a lot of different ways to say what freedom is, okay? So never get it written down. Get that shit specific. Okay, if I tell you, you will let me walk out of here alive, then you will put me on a horse, then you will let me go to Kerch, then you will never look for me again. Get that shit in writing and notarized. But Alexei tells him that it was Alina, and what happens next? Dreesen shoots the man in the head, and it is just like, I don't know, it was a really sad ending for Alexei. I know it's a character we're not really supposed to care about, but they did make us care about him. He had a little crush on Alina. He tried to escape the ship. He tried so hard. And then let's just have a moment of silence. Let's just pour one out for Alexei. This is a bottle of sugar. I'm sorry, Alexei, I don't have a drink to pour out for you. So we're just gonna pour out this fake bottle of sugar. Dreesen then tells Kaz that, okay, Kaz, you can have the job if you can come up with the real plan to get across the fold by sunrise. Otherwise, it's Pekka Rollins' job. And then, boom, black, and we are out. Such a good episode, super, super fast. I like about the show at its best, I like when it just keeps moving. I like when the show just keeps moving. Now, Again, I did talk about this in my other thing. There's a little bloat. There's no bloat in this episode, which makes it a very, very good episode. There's a little bloat later on, but I think they did a really good job going back and forth between Ravka and Ketterdam. I, so far here in this episode, wasn't necessarily as enamored with, the crows yet. Like, I'm not really enamored with Jesper, which I wanted to love Jesper like so quick, and that hasn't happened yet. And I get it, we need to earn it, he needs to earn it, but I kind of like didn't quite love Jesper yet. I didn't quite love Kaz yet, and I think that's why I wanted to spend more time in East Ravka, because I already am in love with Alina and Mal's relationship. Again, I think it is an excellent job that they made Alina half Shu and then actually went into the discrimination. I like that the show talks about what it would have been like to be a person of color in a country that was probably already deeply racist beforehand and is at war with your mother's people. You know what I mean? Enriches Alina's character. That's the thing about when diverse casts happen, you can tell when we're incorporated into the storyline because it just enriches everything. We should not be set dressing. Our histories and our stories can enrich the story at hand, and Alina does. Stop putting this in there as props. We ain't props, we's people. Okay guys, that is it. Let's get excited for episode 2. As always, remember to like, subscribe, thumbs up, and I will see you next time. Bye.